Welcome to the presentation of the post-Keynesian theory of the firm. This theory is not so much concerned with the internal operations of businesses, but with the question of how firms operate in markets that are not fully competitive. The post-Keynesian theory of the firm asks basically two questions. Why and how do firms grow? And how do firms set their prices? The puzzle is this. How is it possible that a huge multinational firm like Unilever started as a small company set up by two Rotterdam brothers making margarine? Today, about half of all households in the world have at least one Unilever product at home. Just open your kitchen cupboards or check the personal care products in your bathroom. Have you recognized the Unilever logo on some of your products? Let me now tell you how post-Keynesian economists explain such a business growth. Post-Keynesian economists have identified two constraints to the growth of firms. The first one is the finance constraint. This is determined by the principle of increasing risk, identified by the policy economist Michael Kalecki. The more capital a firm needs, the higher the risk for the providers of capital to lose money. And the more investors want to get in return for this risk. This drives up the financing cost for a firm. Hence, an expanding firm faces the so-called finance frontier. At the same time, when a firm grows, it can reap economies of scale, as we have seen in a previous video. Hence, a firm can maximize its profit rate through growth, but up to a limit, determined by the cost of capital. We can write this in an equation which shows the trade-offs that a firm faces when it chooses to expand or even enter foreign markets and new types of product markets, just like Unilever did. After the margarine came the soup, pretty much the same market. But then came shampoo and deodorant. Okay, now the equation. Remember that R is the profit rate. We now add G as the firm's growth rate, which is the percentage increase in the balance sheet total. Yes, it's total assets. And X, the external funding necessary for such an expansion. For example, for building a new factory. So, 1 minus X is internal funding, right? If you buy a car which costs £10,000 and you borrow £4,000, this means that you own funding is £6,000, isn't it? Finally, the firm will try to finance as much as possible from its retained profit, for which we use the symbol SC. So the profit rate R is now determined by the growth rate, G, multiplied by internal funding and divided by retained profit. This equation allows you to estimate how big the profit rate should be to achieve a certain growth rate, and vice versa. So the profit rate goes up with more internal funding, which is cheaper than external funding. And the growth rate will be higher when there is more retained profit and less dividend paid out to shareholders. This means that growth can be achieved easier by saving up profits rather than getting a bank loan or attracting new investments. But shareholders want to get a large share of the profit. So it will be difficult to satisfy the shareholders so that they keep on buying shares and to invest in expansion of the firm at the same time. The second constraint to growth is a firm's transaction costs. Transaction costs are costs involved in an exchange, not reflected in the price of the good exchanged. For example, if you want to buy a new car, and you will spend quite some of your leisure time to find the right car at the right price and the best loan condition. The transaction cost of firm growth consists of the expenditures for managerial oversight and the cost for accessing foreign markets. For Unilever, this meant a century ago that the two brothers had to learn English, and later other foreign languages as well, and they needed to be away from Rotterdam a lot, spending money on transport and hotels. And in their absence, they had to appoint a manager to be sure that the margarine was being produced, also when they were away. Today, Unilever's expansion in China means that it has to set up a whole accountancy unit in Shanghai. There, next to factories producing shampoo and deodorant. So growth can be quite expensive. And that is precisely why many firms don't want to become big. The diagram shows the finance frontier and the expansion frontier, with the profit rate on the vertical axis and the growth rate on the horizontal axis. The two constraints to growth, the financial frontier and the transaction cost, bring the profit rate down after a certain firm size. So this is the optimum firm size, where the profit rate is maximized. In a diagram, it's point R. Beyond this point, the profit rate declines. So at point G, the firm is bigger in size than at point R, producing more output. But at point G, the profits are lower than at point R. We call this the Penrose effect, after the British economist Edith Penrose. She discovered that it's smarter to grow in size up to point R than to point G. Bigger doesn't necessarily imply more profitable. Bigger may also mean more costly and riskier. Now we know that in post-Keynesian economics, firms face constraints to growth. We also like to know more about the optimum point R. This is the profit maximization point. How do firms achieve this profit level? A key assumption about markets in a post-Keynesian perspective is that most markets are not fully competitive. Instead, most markets suffer from market power by a few big firms. Because other firms go out of business, are taken over by bigger ones, or engage in mergers. And yes, Unilever is a good example. It dominates various consumer markets, from soup to soap. Big firms can ask higher prices than small firms in more competitive markets, because consumers have less choice in markets with only a few big firms. What's the value of a choice between Pepsi and Coke? Big firms use their market power by simply adding a profit markup to production costs. The markup equation for the product price then is P equals K prime, the markup, multiplied by the unit wage cost, W divided by Y. For simplicity, we ignore other costs, such as material inputs. For example, the shop price of a bicycle may be £500, which is the unit labor cost for producing a bike of, say, £250, multiplied with a markup of 200%. The sales price of £500 then equals 2 times £250. Profits are, as before, big R, which is determined by Y minus W, revenue minus wage cost. I'm confident that by now you remember what each symbol stands for. This simple definition points out that the higher the wage, the lower the profit rate, and vice versa. The lower the wage, the higher the profit rate. This nicely illustrates the conflict between capital and labor. The more the one gets, the less the other gets in a capitalist economy. Who gets what then depends on the relative bargaining power between capital and labor. This is not so in the neoclassical theory of the firm. Profit maximization, growth and wages follow a different logic according to that theory. If you want to learn about that logic, then watch the next video. Now you have received the answers to the two questions at the beginning of this video. Why and how do firms grow, and how they set their prices? Firms grow through investment and expansion to new markets, which becomes more and more expensive, so they stop growing when the finance cost and the transaction cost become too big. And they set their prices as a markup over the cost price rather than following any given market price.